What's going on, guys? What's going on, girls? Sal here. Today I'm going to be reviewing and actually taking a first look at this Thursday night showdown slate for DraftKings. The captain spot is between the Steelers and the Panthers. Pretty good game, right? I mean, based on last Thursday, probably 100 times better of a game. Definitely the outcome will probably be better. I mean, a blowout last week. The team's just better, more points. It's about a 51.5 over under in this one. Point total, and I think it opened at 50, so it's come up, which is a good thing. They see the sharp bettors think that this game's going to go over. In that case, I think there's a lot of cash going in on the over, at least early on. Opened as a 7-point favorite for Pittsburgh. Pretty incredible that they think Pittsburgh, for those of you that don't know, they build basically 3 points in. Some places like the Saints might get 4 points in because they have such a good home field advantage. 3 points in if you're home. So they're 7-point favorites on a neutral field. They think Pittsburgh's a 4-point favorite over Carolina. Maybe. I think maybe it's closer to like a pick'em, maybe like a 1-2 point favorite. I think these teams are pretty evenly matched based on each team's defense. And obviously Pittsburgh has an offense with James Conner out there. Seems to be matchup proof like we saw last week. You can see right here, most expensive player. Wasn't expecting that when you have guys like Antonio Brown and Christian McCaffrey, but it's interesting to see James Conner being the most expensive player, and that's because I believe he's becoming matchup proof. So we're going to take a look at this slate. If you guys don't play one-game slates, we had one last night. And really, you want to think for one-game slates, you're going to split that prize. I've talked about it a lot. You're going to most likely split the prize if you get first place. It's kind of first place or bust on a lot of these because if you come in like 20th, chances are a lot of people are splitting those top 19 prizes up, and you're going to be left with not as much. Obviously, it's a lot more than maybe the $5 to $10 buy-in. But say you come in like 200th and you were supposed to get like 500 bucks, you're probably going to walk away with like pennies, dollars, if that. So you really want to go for the win. So you have to be thinking game flow, right? What I mean by this is last night, it was supposed to be a low-scoring game, right? Or at least people predicted that based on the 40-point over-under it closed at. Both teams have decent defenses. Both teams are probably going to go more run-heavy. And it ended up being, finishing at 28-14, and it barely goes over. It's not a high-scoring game at all, so it goes right in that area, but it finishes in a weirder way where the Titans kind of control most of the game. Mariota, both quarterbacks played decent, tossing for about 250 yards each. Touchdown. Mariota had a few of those, one on the ground as well. So it ends up being this game where not a lot of people saw it going that way, so there's a chance to win a good amount of money. I think first place was split between like 15 to 20 different people, 15,000 each. But you have to think about game flow. If you say, okay, it's going to be a pound and ground game, then you want to start guys like last night, Ezekiel Elliott, Dion Lewis. You want to start guys like Derrick Henry, who all ended up getting in the end zone. Derrick Henry, Dion Lewis, Zeke ended up having a great first half, almost 100 total yards, and he basically got wiped out in the second half when they were trailing the whole game. You want to say, who do I think is going to win? And now you can look at the point spread. Say in this game, it's Pittsburgh's favored, so maybe you say they're going to win. So what does that game look like? Maybe it looks like James Conner getting more work in the second half while they're leading. I think this one's going to be close the whole time, so I think that guys like Christian McCaffrey are going to have game script. He's an independent. He's a game flow independent back because he catches the ball, but I think they're going to have positive game script, him and James Conner, meaning that they're going to both rush the ball the entire 4 quarters and receive the ball, catch the ball the entire 4 quarters, because I think it's going to be close. There's never going to be a moment where either team is going to be blowing out the other team, so it's like Christian McCaffrey's going to get 25 carries because they're leading the whole game, or vice versa for James Conner. But like last week, nobody saw the 49ers blowing out a team, so last week somebody took home the top prize at $250,000 all by themselves. Basically, the top prizes were all taken home by one person because not a lot of people had a San Francisco blowing them out game script. So you have to think about game script, right? If you want to go against the grain and against what Vegas is saying, there's a better chance you're going to take home that top prize because 85% of people started Derek Carr last week. If you didn't have Derek Carr in your lineup, you were the 15% that had a chance for that top prize, basically. So that's a way to take this. Do you want to be strategic and say that, okay, I'm going to bet against Vegas every time, and the 1 or 2 times that it hits, or maybe even more, because recently it's been hitting a lot more, the 1 or 2 times that it hits or go against conventional thinking, I'll have a good shot at winning it all. Or I can play safe every time, and the time that I do win it all, I win like 500 bucks. 500 bucks is a lot, right? If you're putting $10, $5 in, like I said. I like to be more contrarian. I like to always go for the lineups. Like last night, all my lineups ducked. I put 10 lineups in, and they all sucked. I had like Cole Beasley, I had Dion Lewis and Marcus Mariota in some captain spots, but I finished it out with like a lot of kickers, right? And that was a game where I thought kickers were going to have like 2 or 3 field goals each. They didn't. It was all touchdowns. So right there, my lineup ducks, and you just throw in the towel. But in this one, it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of offensive players. It seems like there'll be a higher point total based on just Vegas, what they're saying, 51.5, 51 in some spots. So you kind of want to just get all the players in. This is a game where I wouldn't go kickers. This is a game where I wouldn't go defense. But then again, that's what not a lot of people are going to do. So if you want to be contrarian, throw a kicker in there. He gets 15 points and somebody doesn't have him, there's a better chance you could win. I don't think I'm going to do that early on, but I'll analyze it. If I do play this slate, should be a good game. But let's see. So you have James Conner, 18.3, $18,000 for the captain spot. And he deserves it, right? I mean, look at this. 30-plus points in the majority of his games. 5 out of 8 games, 30-plus points. It seems like Le'Veon Bell, some people are rumoring that he's coming back. Definitely not coming back for Thursday's game. James Conner just continues to get the work. This is honestly like incredible workhorse numbers. This is up there with Todd Gurley. This is up there with guys like Zeke, if not better. Because look at these targets. Holy crap. The dude's getting 5-plus targets. He's probably averaging 6 targets a week. He's catching the ball like 4 to 5 times a week on average, and he's getting 20-plus touches in the rushing game like almost every single week, definitely the last 4 weeks. It's absolutely insane the usage this guy's getting against Carolina, who's not the best up front. This 7 number is going to scare a lot of people off of James Conner, putting him maybe in the captain spot. I think it's smart in a game like this to put Conner in the captain spot because primetime Brown loves primetime. He always ends up scoring on primetime, especially if he's at home. There's a lot of ways you can go with this, right? There's a ton of high potential captain spots, and this kind of scares me because it's going to be tough to nail down who can score the most, which is who you want in your captain spot, because there's so many guys who could score the most, right? I mean, just look at this. Conner, Brown, McCaffrey, Ben, Newton, Juju. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys who could score the most. Now, in a game where there's high scoring, this is just a little tip that I usually do. I don't play the quarterbacks in my captain spot. One, because it usually ends up being really expensive, and because if they're going to go off, chances are one of their position players are going to do better, and their position players are usually cheaper. In this case, these guys are all more expensive than their quarterback. But for example, last night I think Deion Lewis was on the winning captain spot for teams, and that's because Marcus Mariota threw him a touchdown. Marcus Mariota, his touchdowns are only worth 4 points. Deion Lewis's are worth 6 points. If you have him in the captain spot, you're getting 9 points compared to if it's a catching, you get even more because of a point per reception. You're getting 10.5 points compared to Mariota throwing the ball, who only gets a point for every 25 yards, only gets 4 points for a passing touchdown. So that's where you start to differentiate yourself, and it's a lot easier for a receiver, a running back to go over 100 yards than it is for a quarterback to go over 300, in my opinion. And especially when you get all the reception points. If you have like 10 receptions, that's 15 extra points for the captain, whereas if a quarterback has 10 completions, it might not be anything really, depending on how deep they are. So I don't like playing quarterbacks in the captain spot for that reason. If they're a guy who runs the ball like Cam Newton does, there's a little bit more upside because he could run into the end zone and get you those 6-point rushing touchdowns. He's kind of independent in that he gets more points by not using his teammates, by using his own legs. Guys like Mariota and Dak last night were guys in that nature. That's why I had Mariota in some captain spots. But I usually don't like going captain here, so it kind of narrows it down to these 3 if you want to play it safe. Juju is a guy who's definitely sticking out to me a little bit cheaper, priced in that 8,400 range. We got 4 guys priced in 10K or above, and that's nuts. We haven't seen that in a little while at least. We have some of the best playmakers in the game on this slate. And you can see really quick, I mean, with Bell out, you get these top 7 guys right here all the way to Funchess, and then you get Bell out, so that's not somebody you could play. And you have the backup quarterback, so it's going to go from $7,000 when you could play somebody minimum price. That's a huge drop-off from this range right here already. And then the next guy you could play is only 600 cheaper, so that's a little bit different. We usually see there being a wider range, or 1,000 or more. So getting Greg Olsen there, he has a question mark. I believe Greg Olsen should be playing. I don't think there's anything wrong with Olsen. Continues to see the work, continues to run on basically 100% of the offensive plays. Cam Newton loves throwing him the ball. Definitely a guy I always want to have in some of my lineups. DJ Moore was kind of like a bust last week. Somebody I was afraid of playing because he had a ton of hype. I liked him early on in the week because Sutton, as you guys saw in the first look, or some of my breakdown video later in the week for last week, Sutton was getting so much ownership. Him and DJ Moore ended up getting like the same ownership, right? And they both threw up ducks, so I ended up fading both of them in a lot of tournaments, but I had them both in cash. And like I said in the first look video, if you haven't watched it, you can check it out. I'll link it up. But basically, I had them both in cash. I ended up still squeaking out a good profit, but if I really play anybody else at receiver, I do a little better. Sutton did a little bit better than, obviously, Moore having, like, 9 to 2 points, whatever Moore had. So Moore's a guy maybe now because he had all the hype, he threw up a duck. A lot of people will come off of in this spot, right? If people who look at game logs are going to see this. They're going to go, okay, he had 5 points in this game. Oh, he had a rush. That's why I remember he had the long rush. He's been getting a lot of rushes. Look at this. He's had like an 18-yard rush in basically every single game but one. They're going to say, okay, maybe I come back to Moore in this spot. And a lot of people are going to play him just basically because if you have any talent at all, you're going to be 20% owned or more on these one-game slates. Curtis Samuel is a guy that I think will get overplayed because of his recent game. A lot of people look at that and say 20 points. I can bank on him for another 20 points. People are just thinking game logs actually mean something. They predict the future. They don't. Past success does not indicate future success, which is recency bias is the worst way to go about either sports betting or go about playing guys in fantasy. Vance McDonald's an interesting candidate here. He's been kind of slow lately. But he's a guy, especially against Carolina, who's very susceptible to tight ends, can kind of just break one off. We saw last week O.J. Howard had a couple of touchdowns, had a really good game against them. That might be more game script because Howard's touchdowns were both right in the red zone on the exact same play. So that should probably get sharpened up if the Steelers watch any type of tape this week. Jesse James, a very cheap option at 2,400 who continues to get targets and looks, right? I mean, at 2,400, if the guy's guaranteed a floor of probably like 2 points with a ceiling of 15, and it's a wide range, right? But you're in this range on one-game slate. That might be something you take into account. Let's see what's happening with Torrey Smith. He didn't participate on Monday. It's a short week, and they are traveling. I don't foresee him playing. That gives a bump to Samuel, obviously. That gives a bump to DJ Moore. And it probably also gives a bump to Greg Olsen. More targets just to go around for the more trusted players, the starters from the season, from day one. Any value all the way down here. Ian Thomas, wow. Is something up with Ian Thomas? Is he hurt or something? Now that's interesting. He's at $200. He's their starting tight end. He hasn't done much at all, right, since week 5. And I was on him for these couple of weeks saying he was like a sleeper play. I didn't know that he went goose eggs for like 3 weeks. So maybe he's just not playing snaps anymore. Oh, okay. As I'm saying this, obviously Greg Olsen came back. Everything I just said, get out of your head. I don't know why I was so stuck on Greg Olsen like still being out or something. Ian Thomas, do not play Ian Thomas. Okay. All right. Anybody else in here? Anybody else we can find? Usually there's nothing all the way down here. Cameron Artis-Payne, I remember he was like supposed to be the next great thing. Then they got McCaffrey, obviously, and he's just absolutely been gone. Justin Hunter and I believe James Washington have been kind of battling for that last spot. Neither are people that I want to play. They're both punt plays at $1,000. Both guys that can maybe, if they get in the end zone, shift the slate. That's a little bit risky for me. I like Switzer because he does see targets in this offense for there, and he had a couple targets. He had a couple games of a good amount of targets. But they're so low ADOT targets, right? He's getting the ball passed to him out of the backfield. So unless he breaks one off, which I don't see him doing on a screen or something, the man might catch 5 balls, but then actually there's a huge chance that those 5 balls could be for 10 yards, which is nuts. So no upside there. I'm really not seeing any value down in this area. Maybe James Washington or Hunter, depending on who starts if Washington's out. Maybe he plays. I'm not sure what's going on with the questionable tag there. I don't think there's anything serious. Again, the defenses aren't people I want to play in this game, but it's a good way to be contrarian because it's supposed to be high scoring. If one defense basically just gets an interception or a kick return, you have a decent shot at having a guy in your lineup or a defense in your lineup that scores double-digit points that nobody has. But again, that's a stretch. The kicker is not in a bad spot with a higher total game, but these offenses usually don't stall in the red zone. I think maybe the Panthers are pretty high up there in converting in the red zone, so I don't think that I'm going to go kickers. This seems like a position player game, right? So let's try and build a lineup. Love Greg Olsen. Love somebody like Juju. Let's see if we put Juju in the captain spot, who's a guy who's been seeing targets. He's a guy who finally got back on the hump here, and he's been out of the end zone for a while. He started off the season hot, just getting tons of 100-yard games. He's basically unguardable, especially if he comes out of the slot, which he lines up there a lot. So I don't know. This slate's incredible because just look at these playmakers. Like I said, Antonio Brown just loves the prime time, right? He shows out in prime time. Big Ben at home. He's the guy that you always want to play when he's at home, especially if he has a good matchup. If there's going to be high points, he's probably going to be throwing the ball. Like, I want all of these guys in my lineup, but obviously you can't do that. You can't even get anywhere close to that unless you're going to punt maybe with like a 200-yard or a $200 guy in your captain spot. I just don't see a game. I don't see a game flow in where James Conner doesn't have at least 15 points in this game, and if he gets in the end zone more, right? If he's catching 5 balls for like 20 yards, he has a 7-point floor just in the receiving game right there, and that's if it only goes for 20 yards. This man is in breaking tackles, his elusiveness is high, and that's if he's probably going to rush the ball 15 to 20 times and probably at least get 50 yards on the ground, right? I think this guy's floor is like 12 to 15 points, which on a showdown slate is incredible. That's why he's the highest priced player. Cam Newton could be a sneaky captain play. Like I said, I don't like putting quarterbacks in there, but I did mention his legs. His legs are really a guaranteed 3 points with you, and if he gets in the end zone, his legs have the upside of being like 11 points on the ground at a ceiling. His ceiling's probably 2 touchdowns rushing because they love when they get in the red zone to kind of just do quarterback draw Cam right up the middle or something like that. Call his own number. I love this game. I think this is a game where I want both quarterbacks, which I think a lot of people are going to do. They're going to want both quarterbacks because I think both quarterbacks have the chance to go over 300 yards in this game, which if they go over 300 yards, you're probably throwing at least 1 touchdown, probably 2. Cam on the ground can get you a little bit more points. Let's see if we did something like this. Let's see if you did captain Cam, but still had Ben. So you're getting both quarterbacks, but you're putting one in that captain spot, which I think a lot less people are going to do because you have so much talent here in these top 4 to 5 to even coming down here to Olsen and DJ Moore, spots like that. Now we only have 6,300 to spend, but I think we have just so much value that it doesn't really matter. Like, I want Greg Olsen. That's about the 6,400. Let's say we get both starting tight ends. Now you have 7K to spend. You can get Funches. Can we get Juju in this lineup? If we go Juju there, you'd have to come down. Curtis Samuel is not a terrible option. We saw what he did last week. So this is one build, and we already see, because there's 4 guys in the 10K range, that it's going to be tough to get a lot of these studs in the lineup, right? They're 10K, not counting the captain price. So one of them, if you're going to play them, is going to be higher. We went a little bit cheaper with Cam, if you could say that, 14,400, right? 14.4. I don't mind this lineup at all. I think having both tight ends differentiates you. Having basically like the number 2 receiver, maybe we could say Samuel's the number 2 receiver if Smith's out. Obviously, I think it's DJ Moore. Probably is Greg Olsen if you want to go that route. But we definitely have the number 2 receiver for the Steelers. We have number 3, number 2 upside with Curtis Samuel. I do think he's in line for sort of like a bust week. Another thing I like doing is leaving salary on the table. Nobody likes to have, so like here, for example, say you go Jesse James here, right? Which I don't mind doing. I'd like to get another playmaker for Carolina, but maybe Cam Newton throws 2 tutties to Greg Olsen and you're in line there, right? Anything can happen. But we have $3,200 now left on this slate. $3,200, nobody likes having money left over, and it makes sense, right? Because with $3,200, you can go up to Vance McDonald, and then you can get up to Devin Funches, right? And now we have 2 pass catchers for each team in there, 2 good pass catchers, and this might be a better lineup, right? And you still have $1,200 left on the table, so a lot of people are going to see that $1,200, and they're going to go, I don't want to leave $1,200 on the table. They're going to take out Jesse James. They're going to see, what can I get up to? They're going to say, okay, I'd rather get a kicker in here just so I have no money left over. I think a great strategy is leave money on the table, right? So if we didn't want Funches in this situation and we wanted to come down to even say DJ Moore, you have $2,400 left over. Again, a lot of people are going to say that's way too much money. But in these lineups where you want to differentiate your lineup to have a chance to take home the top prize, like literally to retire tomorrow, 250,000, 200,000, whatever it is, that's been what these numbers have been. I think a good way to do that is to leave money on the table. And now obviously you have to tell yourself if you're leaving money on the table, you're probably missing out on some upside. But in this situation, I don't think you are. I think going DJ Moore over Devin Funches might be a better option, right? If Devin Funches is going to get the Joe Hayden shadow job, I like DJ Moore more than Devin Funches. Let's see if we can come up at anybody here. So I don't want to have Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, and Olsen. I don't think it's a terrible option, actually. It depends on what Cam Newton does. I'd rather have somebody like Jesse James who, again, his floor is so low. If he doesn't do anything, you're screwed. But if he catches 4 balls, 50 yards, and a touchdown, that's all you need out of him at 2,400 to get you 15 points, where he's probably going to be very low owned since Vance McDonald's also on this team. I'll have to check how many snaps he's playing, but this is just a first look strategy. I like leaving money on the table. I don't like playing quarterbacks, so I'm kind of going against myself, unless they're running quarterbacks, because then there's some upside. Let's see if we try to build like a cheaper lineup, because I don't like that we don't have any exposure to these 3 players, but again, if you're entering multiple lineups, you can get that exposure through other lineups. I just don't like how we have 2 playmaking running backs that we're not touching. But again, that's a way to be contrarian. Say for some reason this is just a 400-yard game for both quarterbacks, the running backs get like 10 points each or whatever it might be. If it's a 400-yard game for Cam, or actually even Ben in this case, obviously I think they're going to catch some balls. But let's just say the running backs get taken out of this game, they game plan for them. Both of them have decent run-stop defenses, probably both top 10. So that's a possibility, right? And that's a way to be contrarian, because I guarantee these guys are each going to be 60% owned, especially since they're so high. So if you fade them, risky, very risky, but it's like fading Derek Carr last week. Very risky, but ultimate payoff. This is a lineup that I'll actually probably try and build, play around with, one where we don't have any of the running backs. But on the first drive of James Conner or CJ McCaffrey get in the end zone, you're kind of screwed then. So let's see one now if we just fade the quarterbacks, right? And that could be another contrarian play. So let's say we go James Conner and we go Christian McCaffrey. Let's go back to Juju. I just love Juju in this situation. I think he's also a big primetime player. We saw him catch like a 90-yard touchdown, whatever it was last year in breakaway. I think he always performs in primetime against the Ravens when Steelers weren't doing anything. The man still had like 70 yards. So now we have 4,600. That's a very low number. Who do we have down here? I don't really want to punt with any. If I'm going to punt, I'd rather go Jesse James again, which isn't that ideal. You know, both Steelers tight ends, I don't want that at all, but that's another way to be contrarian. Nobody's going to play both Steelers tight ends. If you go Greg Olsen, you have 5K left. You can go for the Steelers tight end, you can go for this. So I don't really like this lineup at all, but again, This is another way you can get all the playmakers in the game. You can get both running backs. Can we get a... Now, let's say just one thing to do before we're done. Can we do something like a Steelers onslaught? Like, it's just a blowout at home. Short week for Carolina. Steelers blowout at home. Maybe we want to save 6K. We go Juju. We go Connor. We go Big Ben. Now we have 5K. If it's a blowout at home, Connor's probably going to get work. Maybe Juju gets some end zone usage. Antonio Brown, not playing him is just so dangerous. I haven't touched him at all. That's scary, but obviously I'm going to try and get him in some lineups. If they're trailing, McCaffrey's probably going to get a lot of work. So is Cam, but we don't have a lot of money. Jesse James here, and then you have 3K. Defenses don't want to use, but if it's a blowout at home, maybe use the Steelers defense, get that correlation with Connor. Now these are just lineups that I'm just trying to build based on game flow, right? And it is so expensive. You're almost forced to use Jesse James, right? Or one of these defenses down here because it's just nuts how expensive these... Look at these captain prices. 18, 17, 17, 15, 14, 12, 10. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Basically, I mean, the backups, you're not going to use any of them. 7 guys that are basically in that 10K range or more. They are. I mean, they all are right here. So that's nuts. It's going to be a tough way to fit in a lot of the guys you want to fit in. There's probably a sneaky way you could do this by... I mean, let's see if we just threw some guy out there. Let's say Washington's going to play. He's super cheap at $1,000. And now you can kind of just go Ben... Cam, Connor. Now you can fit some of these guys, right? Let's say you go down to Greg Olsen to free up some more money. Damn, we just missed out on McCaffrey. You don't want to punt twice when you're punting once, so like I don't want to go with Jesse James again. Again, they'll be super contrarian. You'll probably have the only lineup that has Washington and captain with Jesse James. So if you did do something like that, you do have some upside. Curtis Samuel, that gets us up here. We can go McCaffrey or Brown. In this situation, this is a terrible lineup, right? But again, the guys who win probably have these lineups. You go something like that, right? Cam, he gets 2 pass catchers, and you get a few for Big Ben with James Conner being the running back and a pass catcher. So that's just how I'm looking at this slate. Again, probably the best thing I want to emphasize from this video that came out of this was I like leaving cash on the table in these one-game slates because it's so low variance that I think that's a good strategy to differentiate yourself because everybody's trying to spend every single dollar, as you probably should. But in this situation, I don't think it's a bad idea not to. And then I think just strategy-wise is just to think game flow. Like, think of 10 different... If you're going to enter 10 lineups, think of 10 different situations, or just 5, and then play around with a lineup for each of them, in where it's a close game to the end and a shootout. Who do you want on your team in that case? Where the Panthers dominate the Steelers, and nobody's going to see that happening on a short week, especially since this game is favored by the Steelers. You're automatically setting yourself up for being in that top percentage. Now, what are the players that you want if the Panthers were to dominate the Steelers? Probably Cam Newton, probably Greg Olsen, McCaffrey, maybe a punt play in there, Curtis Samuel, whoever it might be. What if the Steelers actually win a close game by like 4 to 7 points, and the game ends up being with the 51.5 point over/under saying like the Steelers score whatever 26 points to the 23 or whatever it ends up being when you break that number down, 27 to the 23 or 28 to the 24, whatever it might be. What happens if that ends up being at 4 touchdowns for one team, 3 for the other? Who's going to get them? So you just want to try and work out game flow like that. I appreciate it if that's it for this video, but I appreciate it if you guys can hit the like button if you're still watching. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's just right down there in the corner, whichever side of the screen. The little red button. If you can just hit that and subscribe. It doesn't take a lot of effort for you guys, so if you enjoyed this video, it means a lot to me. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers in the next week. Big number. Just hit 300 today, literally like 10 minutes ago, so that's awesome. We're moving up a lot. Liking this video also means a lot to me, guys. Go check out the first look video. If you comment just who you think is going to score the most in this Thursday night game on that video, you'll be entered for a $20 Millie Maker entry that I'll be giving out whenever I hit 500 subscribers. I'll come back to that video. I appreciate it, guys. My name's Sal. Comment below if you have any other questions on this too. Be good, be safe, best of luck. Peace.